it like AGT. We just had the golden buzzer moment here. Oh, so grateful for the graduates. They're so amazing. They're so awesome. Well, today we also have a message for you straight out of John 18. And I am so excited about this message and what we've been preparing for this message. I will tell you what, though, that while preparing for this message, I kind of got my intro yesterday. And I want to also just address the elephant in the room for a moment here, me wearing a hat. You see, I never actually preach with a hat. I usually never preach with a hat, and it's not because of anything like really biblical or anything. It's more of a traditional thing. You know, in the Marine Corps, I still, like when I pray, I take off my hat. I usually don't wear hats, and I won't wear hats whenever I preach because I'm a little more on that traditional side. And so I always have, it's like a respect thing that I always learn. So I always try to not preach with a hat. But yesterday, I had this amazing and really cool opportunity. I got this amazing opportunity to go on a really cool run with one of the little girls from our church. Her dad is gone on a submarine right now, and she had a Girls on the Run event. And so they were like, hey, would you run with her? And it was my honor. I was like, yes, that would be so much fun. Let's do that. I had to learn what a 5K was because I don't do the metric system. And then when I looked up a 5K, I was really surprised to learn it's 3.1 miles. You crazy? We're running this? But it was super fun. Now, of course, because it's Girls on the Run and it's this big event, and I don't have girls, I have boys, you know, and so I'm like, you know what? I'm in your hands. You tell me what to do. Let's do this. Let's do this together. And she's like, all right, let's do it. So they decorated my face with like kitty cat whiskers and glitter and got me this cool highlighter hat, you know, that's up there. But then she's like, that's not enough. We also need to do something about what's underneath the hat. And that's when the pink hair dye came out. And it turns out temporary pink hair dye does wash off of hair. It doesn't wash off of the scalp. And that's the problem. Is that. So I said, well, today I'm going to preach with a cap to be a little less distracting. I washed my head like 10 times. So it was super fun and an amazing event. It was so much fun running with her. And even while we're running with her, all of a sudden there's this moment where it was just the sermon, just kind of like staring me right in front. And it comes around mile 3. Around mile 3, now here's this point where all these parents, and they're running with their kids, and all these volunteers, they're running with their kids. And a lot of the parents were like me. They didn't know what a 5K was. So when they got to mile 3, they were pretty surprised. There's 3? And all of a sudden, as we're running past this stretch and we're going into this final place, there was a whole lot of praying from a lot of the overweight parents and a lot of the parents together. Whole lot of Jesus' name being used. Whole lot of people breathing out prayers and saying, Lord, help me. And I saw a whole lot of people just in deep, deep prayer. I assume that's what they were doing when they were doing this. It was a lot of deep prayer. But at this moment when they were all praying, I had this idea and I had this thought. And I was thinking, like, I wonder how many people here are really, like, you know, really following Jesus, like really Christians. Because you don't know. That's not something you go and ask, you know. Hey, are you a Christian? You know, or anything like that. But I wonder how many people were actually, like, really, really Christians or believing in Jesus, or how many people were using God's name in that moment of like, I need your help, Jesus. I wonder how many of those people were denying Jesus throughout life and throughout the week and throughout all of their days. But then in that one moment, they're like, Jesus, please help me. I cannot run this next 3 miles. Help me, Jesus. And it was at that moment that I had a thought, that a rooster started to crow. Not joking. Now, it's over at the Kitsap Fairgrounds, so there was the wild animal barns and stuff like that, so we just happened to be running past that, but I was like, you know what, that's going in the message, all right? The rooster crowed, because we are talking about that rooster crowing today and talking about what that is, and also even denying Jesus and in those times of hardship saying, Jesus, I need you, and making that your time. So if you're following along in the Bible and you're following along with us, if you go ahead and turn your Bibles to John 18, 18. So it's John 18, if you wanted to come and follow along with us. Now in John 18, I want to give you guys just a little bit of context, of what's happening in this first part. So in this first part, it's actually just after Jesus, it's right after Jesus had given that prayer. And that prayer is for the disciples and for all of the future believers. For all of us, he was praying. And Pastor Joel did an amazing job of talking about that last week. So it's right after that prayer in the garden. But here's Jesus, and he's in that garden, and he's got his disciples around him. So imagine them. They're in this garden, and it's this peaceful night. And then while they're praying and right after the prayer and while they're there in the garden, here comes Judas, that rapscallion. Here comes Judas, all of a sudden with the guards of the temple and with the lead priests, the head priests, and they're coming to arrest Jesus. He comes out, and now they're coming to arrest Jesus. And Jesus knows this is going to happen. Jesus knew this was going to happen. In fact, Jesus told everybody this is going to happen. He said over and over and over again, he told the disciples, this is going to happen. And we see that here in verse 4, Jesus, knowing that all of this was going to happen to him, he went out and he asked the guards and the chief priests and all the people that are coming for him. He goes out to them and he says, who is it that you want? And they say, Jesus of Nazareth. And then Jesus says this, I am he. And it says here, and Judas, the traitor, was standing there with him. There's no love for Judas in the Gospel of John. He always calls him Judas the traitor. But in this, Judas is standing there with them. And when Jesus said, I am he, they drew back and they fell to the ground. Think of that. Okay, now here's this moment. Here's all these guards and all these chief priests, and they're coming out. Like, this is just the context of what we're going to go through. But imagine this context in this time. They're in the garden. Here comes all the guards, the priests, and all the people, and they're coming and they're saying, okay, we're going to arrest Jesus. We're going to go get him. We're going to go get him. And as soon as they meet him, then Jesus says, I am he. And immediately they fall back and they go to the ground. And that word, that fall back, it's actually this Greek word called pipto. And pipto, it means to fall hard, to prostrate oneself, to fall in awe or terror, to fall in a way that's like you're just collapsed, right? To fall in this massive manner. And so it's telling us that all of a sudden, here's Jesus, and he's saying, I am he, and everyone falls down. That's the power of God, and whether it's by power of God and conscience or whatever, it's amazing that all of a sudden the person that they came to arrest, he says, I'm that guy, I am he, and they fall back. They fall down. Imagine if you're Judas and you're seeing this, like, hey guys, we're gonna go get him. We're gonna come on guys, we got this guy, let's do this. And they're all coming over together, and then he says, yep, that's me, and everyone just falls down before him. Man, that shows the power of who Jesus is, who Jesus really is. Imagine if you're one of those guards, one of those priests that's saying, okay, we're going to arrest him. What would you be thinking then? Uh-oh, why are we doing this? But Jesus knows that it's supposed to happen. Jesus knows that it's supposed to happen. And here's the thing. A lot of people say, well, here's Jesus. Like, Jesus got caught and then he was taken. You know what? This shows us that even if Jesus didn't have to go to the cross. He didn't have to go to the cross because people were bowing down before him. He has the power. He didn't have to go to the cross unless it was by his will. It wasn't that he was forced. No, they were down on the ground. But because it was God's plan, because it's God's way, because of what Jesus was going to do, Jesus willingly allowed himself to be arrested and to go onto the cross for each and every one of us. It wasn't like they were just, you're forced in this. He willingly did this for you. Willingly did this for the disciples. Willingly did it. And we see that willingness in the very next verse. They reply, Jesus of Nazareth, and he asked them again, who is it that you want? Remember, they're on the ground now. They're going, oh my goodness, what is happening? Who is it that you want? And they say, Jesus of Nazareth. I have to imagine that when they said that, they were probably like, Jesus of Nazareth? They were probably getting a little scared there. But Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, then let these other men go, meaning his disciples. Let these other disciples go. And this happened so that the words would be spoken would be fulfilled. I have not lost one of those you gave me. Jesus didn't have to be captured, but he allowed himself to be arrested for each and every one of us. That's incredible. Now imagine if you're seeing that. It would be even more incredible. And Jesus was willing to go. But his disciples, not so much. His disciples were like, okay, wait a minute. We don't like this. This is not happening. And then all of a sudden we see then Simon Peter, who we often just call Peter. So then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Think about that. He's like, no, you will not take our Lord. And now he's cutting off ears. And here's Jesus. He commanded Peter, put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? Meaning he's going to go willingly. He's going to go for all of us. In Luke 22:51, though, it also shows that Jesus restores this man's ear. So Jesus answered, no more of this. And then he touched the man's ear and healed him. Imagine that. You're seeing all of a sudden soldiers coming out. You're seeing all these soldiers coming out. We're going to arrest him. They fall back as soon as Jesus says, I am he. They fall to the ground. Now Jesus allows them up and says, okay, here I am he. Go ahead and take me. Peter cuts off the man's ear, and Jesus heals that right in front of them. If you were one of the guards, you'd be pretty terrified right now. What am I doing? If you're Judas, you're going, oops. And if you are one of his disciples, you probably are looking at Jesus going, man, we knew he was who he says he was. Look at what he did. People bowed down in front of him. Even the guards and the chief priests are bowing down before him over his power. And now he's healing people's ears and he's doing stuff right in front of us. You would think that would embolden the disciples, right? You would think that the disciples would be like, oh my goodness, we are going to go through anything you want us to because, man, we just saw this incredible thing. And they've been seeing so many incredible things over and over and over again. They've been seeing who Jesus is. They've been walking with Jesus. They know who he is. You would think it would embolden them, right? But not more than just a few hours later. All of a sudden, we see Simon Peter, who comes with the other disciples, and they were following Jesus. And because his disciple was known to the high priest, he went to Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. And this is the big deal. Peter had to wait outside the door. So Jesus is inside. He's inside. Peter's having to wait outside. He knows that he's a follower of Jesus. He's like, okay, I want to see what happens to Jesus. But then the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke with the servant girl on duty, and brought Peter in. And then the servant girl says, you aren't one of those man's disciples too, are you? And she asked Peter, and Peter says, no, I'm not. Why? Like you would think Peter would be so emboldened. You would think, man, I just saw this incredible stuff. I've been walking with Jesus. I've been living with Jesus. I've been doing stuff with Jesus. Why does he say, no, I'm not? Well, one is because he's scared. It's like there's danger. There's danger here. Jesus is about to go through danger. And so part of it is he's scared, so he lies. But I love that the very next verse, John starts explaining a little bit more. He gives us a little bit more context. It says this, it was cold outside, and the servants and officials stood around the fire that they had made to keep warm. And Peter was also standing with them, warming himself. So it's cold, and now he's sitting by the fire. Now he's warm, he's comfortable, he's safe. I can relate. I hate the cold, so warmth is good. But then all of a sudden, meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself, comfortable and safe. So they asked him, you aren't one of those disciples, are you? And he denied it again, saying, I am not. The danger still exists, but now here's a time when all of a sudden, here is Peter, and now he's comfortable. And he's safe. I mean, think about this. I love that John puts this in. I love that John puts this in several times that he's standing by a fire. Why does that make a difference? Like, why does it make a difference where he is? And I think John is trying to allude that all of a sudden, when you're comfortable and now you're safe, all of a sudden it was easier just to deny Jesus. He's comfortable. He's safe. It's kind of like us. We get comfortable. We get safe. It's easier to deny Jesus when we're comfortable. When we're safe, to keep that comfort going and that safety. And so Peter, who should have been emboldened and should have been like, yes, I'm one of his disciples, says, no, I'm not. And this isn't like days and weeks and months after all of these events. This is hours after that. But then one of the high servants, one of the high priest servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. Didn't I see you in the garden? Didn't I see you with that Jesus guy in the garden? Now think about this. This is one of those guys that he probably would have remembered Peter because he was there in the garden and Peter's over there cutting off ears before Mike Tyson made it cool, right? All of a sudden, here he is, and he's over there cutting off ears. You remember that, right? You remember seeing an ear get cut off. But I can understand why this guy is questioning and saying, and not saying, I know it was you. Why he's saying, didn't I see you? And he's a little confused. Because here's the thing, he also saw an ear get restored. And I'll tell you what, if I'm out there somewhere and somebody cuts off somebody's ear, right, I'm probably going to remember the guy that cut off that person's ear. Until somebody comes up, picks up the ear, sticks it back on somebody's face and says, boom, it's healed, and it's actually healed. I'm probably going to forget a little bit of that guy that just cut off the ear, and I'm going to really concentrate on the guy who did the healing. I'm going to know that guy because, man, that's amazing. That's a miracle. So he's probably a little confused, and he's like, well, wait a minute. Didn't I see you? Wasn't that you out there? And he probably is also a little, he knows the guy that had his ear cut off. He's like, dude, that's my cousin. Didn't you cut off my cousin's ear? I don't know if it's his cousin, it just says relatives. But he's like, man, isn't that my cousin? Like, you just cut off his ear. Isn't that you? I'm a little confused. But then Peter again denied it. So nope, that wasn't me. And at that moment, a rooster began to crow. And I will tell you, that's the last part of that in John chapter 8. And it's so impactful because at that moment that the rooster started to crow, all of a sudden Peter's heart must have just leapt out of his chest and he must have felt horrible. And the reason why was because it was a fulfilled prophecy. It had happened several chapters earlier, in chapter 13. In chapter 13, this is a time when Jesus is there with his disciples in the Last Supper, and he had just washed the disciples' feet, and he's talking with the disciples, and he's sharing with them what's going to happen. And it's in chapter 13, 5 chapters before all of this. In chapter 13, here's Jesus eating with all of his disciples, and Peter asked him, and he says, Lord, why can't I follow you? Meaning, why can't I follow you to where you're going? Why can't I follow you? I will lay down my life for you. Peter is saying, look, I'll do anything for you. This is that night. He's saying, look, I'll do anything for you. I will lay down my life for you. I will cut off ears for you. I will do all of these things. Man, I'm for you, Jesus. And Jesus looked back over to him and he says, will you really lay down your life for me? Very truly I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And it's in this moment in John chapter 18 that it happens. Denies him 3 times and the rooster starts crowing. Imagine if you were hearing that. Oh, that would be devastating. It would be devastating. But Jesus always knew that Peter was going to deny him. He knew that was going to happen. Just as Jesus knew Judas was going to betray him. He knew that all these things were going to happen. He knew what was going to happen. But I started to think at these verses, and I started to think of them in a different way and started to think, I wonder, I think both of those betrayals probably hurt. They probably hurt Jesus. Even though he knows they're going to happen, it would hurt. It would hurt that this is going to happen, right? But I bet you one of them hurt just a little bit more. Reason being, it's because here is Judas. Judas, he always knew was going to betray him. And Judas kind of had a kind of troubled walk with the truth as it went anyway. Judas also betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. He betrayed him for the world. He betrayed him for stuff. He betrayed him for those things. You can kind of almost understand that even though it hurts and that's not good and that's not okay, still he was betraying him and there was something there. And I'm sure that hurt Jesus. But I think the one that hurt the more was actually Peter. The reason being because here is Peter, the one that is the rock, the one that Jesus said, you are now named Peter. His name was Simon before, and he says, I'm now calling you Peter, meaning the rock, because on this rock, I'm going to build my church, meaning you are such a believer, you are such a follower that on this rock, I'm going to build my church. Not Peter's going to build the church. I'm going to build my church through you. This is Peter, the great follower of Jesus, the friend of Jesus, the one who wants to give his life for Jesus. Yet, he denied him for safety and comfort. Not worldly gain or anything, but just a temporary moment, a lapse, just a moment. I bet you that hurt. And I think we do that often as well. A lot of people, we do that, where we deny Jesus. We deny Jesus all of the time. We deny Jesus in a lot of the things that we do and a lot of the actions that we have and a lot of the things. And a lot of you are probably thinking right now, okay, wait a minute. I've never denied Jesus. I've never been sitting around the fire and saying, I don't believe in Jesus. I've never denied Jesus saying, no, I'm not a disciple of Jesus. I've never been in a situation where I have said, hey, I don't believe in him. Some of us have never been in that situation. So a lot of people go like, well, I would never deny Jesus. But saying you deny Jesus is not the only way to deny Jesus. Saying that isn't the only way to deny Jesus. So let me share with you just a couple of the ways that we as people often deny Jesus. Number one is this: we deny Jesus by our absence. We deny Jesus by our absence, by abstaining from relationship with Jesus. By saying, okay, Jesus, I'm only going to come to you when I need something, but not really whenever you need something or whenever I want to, or whenever I'm supposed to follow. When I need something because I'm running a 5K and this is horrible, I didn't know it was 3 miles long, then I'm coming to you. But that's the only time. We deny him by relationship, by not having a relationship with Jesus. I always express this in a different analogy, and you guys have heard this analogy before, but it's like a marriage. It's like a marriage where all of a sudden, look, if you have a spouse, a husband and wife, how many of you would be okay with your spouse if your spouse told you, okay, look, I love you. I thank you so much for everything you do. You are so amazing. I love you, but I don't want to spend any time with you. I don't want to really get to know you. I really don't want to have a big relationship with you, but I'll tell you what there, wifey, anytime I need you, I want you to come and help me out. But then as soon as we're done with that, I'm going to go over here. I don't need you anymore. Now, how many of you would be okay in a marriage like that? That would be pretty rough. We deny Jesus all the time with our absence by abstaining from a relationship with him. We deny also Jesus by non-reliance, by not allowing ourselves to rely on him. We have an American idea. I can do all things by me, by myself, by I. In America, we are very much kind of a culture of I, right? I could do everything. And the world always tells us you could do anything that you want, everything that you want to do, you could do it. You are good, you could do all of these things. The Bible tells us something different. It says you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. I can do all things through Jesus, through God who strengthens me. Not me who strengthens me. And here's what I would tell you: if you are only ever relying on your own self-reliance, on your own self, if it's you that's saying, man, that's me, I'm doing all of this. This is a me thing. I will tell you, there is going to come so many moments in life where you burn out. Where you burn out and you realize you're not enough. And you know what? You're not enough. That's why we need Jesus. There's going to be so many moments in life where you're like, I can't do this. I'm struggling. I'm frustrated. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm all of these things. We weren't made to do everything by ourselves. We're made to do it with Jesus. Through a relationship, we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Not we can do all things through me, myself, and I because I strengthen myself. So we deny Jesus by our own reliance, not allowing ourselves to rely on him. We deny also Jesus by our action and our inaction, by our deeds, by our works, by the lack thereof, by things that we choose to do or not do, by sin, by sinning and continually to do that and knowingly doing it and saying, okay, I'm just going to continue walking in this path that I know is not good for me. Lord, help me every time I mess up, but I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to keep walking in this. By our action and our inaction, we deny Jesus. It says this in Titus 1:16. They profess to know God, but in their works they deny him, being abominable, disobedient, and disqualified for every good work. It's by our works. We have to actually follow Jesus, change our ways and our works. So we deny Jesus by our actions and inaction. And then we deny Jesus by our compromises. By allowing compromises to come in, saying, you know what, I would rather actually follow the world and all of the world's views because all of the modern new stuff is way better than what Jesus could come up with, right? All these new things, I'm going to compromise myself, my morals, my ideas, everything that we have and everything that we know. I'm going to compromise everything and just live over here for the world instead of living over here with Jesus. By our compromises and our choosing the world versus his words, we mess up and we stop relying on him. When we do that, we get into a place where we're denying Jesus. Or we deny Jesus. And we start moving towards just our own reliance. All right, so now looking at just those four, and this is not a comprehensive list, okay, but looking at just those four things that we often do, that people often do, that deny Jesus, how many of you have never done any of those? Okay, not very many. One, but I think he's sarcastic. I would tell you we all do that. I will tell you I've done those. I do that. We all do that. We all mess up. But we have all denied Jesus. We've all been Peter. We've all been Peter and denied Jesus at different times in our lives. So how do we get past that? How do we get to a place that we're no longer denying Jesus, where we get into this place where we're saying, okay, Jesus, I'm not going to deny you. I don't want to be like that, Peter, anymore. I don't want to be like that where I'm constantly denying Jesus or where I'm tempted to deny you. Lord, I want to have a relationship with you. I want to be with you. I want to do everything with you. How do we get into a place where we can be like that, seeking out Jesus in everything we do? We do it by denying ourselves. We do it by denying ourselves. In Luke 9:23, it says this, then Jesus said to them, if anyone desires to come after me, meaning to follow him, to be with him, to be guided by him, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Not take up your cross once a month, once a year, twice a year, Christmas and Easter, but daily and follow me. Deny yourself and come and follow me. It means that we need to know him, follow him, allow him to change us, not just once a week, not just once a year, but daily. It says daily pick up your cross and follow me. That's how we keep from denying Jesus. And that's how we find that relationship and know that relationship with Jesus daily, saying, Jesus, I want more of you. Jesus, I need you. Jesus, I want to take up my cross daily. I want to humble myself daily. Jesus, I want to be with you in everything. Jesus, keep me from denying you because I'm going to do it again and again and again. I am so tempted to. I tell you what, that's one of my prayers in the mornings. Jesus, keep me strong for you today because I know the world is going to tempt me the other way. We have to daily say, Jesus, I want more of you and help me, Lord, in this. Are you going to mess up in that? Yep. A lot. So did Peter. Peter messed up a lot. That wasn't just the only time. The rock, absolutely, the church was built on that rock. But man, Peter messed up a lot. He had feuds with Paul. There was all kinds of stuff that were happening where Peter did mess up. He wasn't perfect. Nobody's perfect. We aren't perfect. But daily, I believe that Peter was waking up and saying, okay, Lord, I need you to change me. I need you to help me. I need to figure this thing out because I want to follow you. Daily, we have to be that. And yes, you are going to mess up. But that's where we also have grace and we have mercy. And it's not an excuse to just continue messing up and just continue doing it. God forgives us. That's okay. So now we can just continue over and over and over and over and over again in this cycle because that cycle will never get broken when you have that kind of an attitude. But it's more of a, hey, Jesus, I recognize this is wrong and I need to follow you. Show me how. How do I do this? Daily coming to Jesus, saying, show me how to do this. As we conclude today, as the band comes up, I will tell you this. Oftentimes when we're reading through John, there's a lot of these chapters. There's a lot of these moments and a lot of these things that are in these chapters that are also very convicting. And we need those convicting messages. We need those convicting messages because they sharpen us, right? They sharpen us. But oftentimes too, like as I'm going through this and as I preach and doing this, I also sometimes feel like I'm always beating people over the head with a Bible, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to just keep beating people over the head because there is no real beatings happening here, okay? So let's just specify that for the internet and the video, okay? So we are doing that. But it kind of feels like all the time, sometimes when you read the Bible, you're like, oh man, I'm failing. But here's the thing, is that we also have grace. And yes, that failing is not an excuse. It's not a reason to keep on doing it. But I will tell you this, that we also have grace and we have mercy from Jesus. And we see that in the conversation that Peter has with Jesus after all of this. After all of this, it's in chapter 21. In John chapter 21, this is a time after Jesus has been crucified. As he's been crucified, as he died, as he's buried again, as he's buried, and then all of a sudden he comes back to life. And he lives with the disciples for 40 days. And he's living with them, and he's talking with them, and he's eating with them. He's having a meal. The risen Jesus is having a meal with Peter. And he's talking to Peter, and he says this. When he finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And Peter says, yes, Lord, I love you. You know that I love you. And Jesus tells him, then feed my lambs. Again, Jesus says to him again, son of John, Simon Peter, do you love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus tells him, then take care of my sheep. And then a third time comes. And in this third time, he says to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him for a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all these things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, then feed my sheep. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. And Jesus asked him 3 times, do you love me? Do you love me? A lot of people ask me and they say, how can I get back on track with Jesus? Hey, I realize I have been denying Jesus, or I have been struggling with some of this. And people ask me, how do I get back on track with Jesus? And I say it's in that verse. Start with that. do you love him? Think about it. Do you love Jesus? And if you do, then tell him. And go that way daily, asking him, Jesus, I love you. What do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? Daily picking up your cross and going with him. And for some of you, you might be going, okay, well, no, I don't love Jesus yet. I don't love Jesus. And then your next step is a different one. Your next step is to get to know Jesus. Because when you get to know him, when you get to study him, when you get to talk with him, when you get to knowing him, I'm telling you, you're going to start to love him. And then you're in a place where now you love him. But your step is this. Do you love him? If you do, then follow him daily, waking up saying, Jesus, I want to follow you. Show me how. Help me to pick up my cross and follow you. And there's mercy and there's grace in that prayer. And yes, you're going to mess up, but daily and over, I also believe that Jesus is also looking at us saying, do you love me? Yes, Jesus, I love you. Then pick up your cross. Follow me. Continue on. There's forgiveness, there is mercy and grace in Jesus. But we start with that. Learning to love Jesus and knowing Jesus, I love you. That's your challenge this week. Daily waking up and saying, Jesus, I love you. Show me what you want me to do. And just like he showed Peter, and he told Peter to go out, and those were specific commands, go feed my sheep, go do this with my lambs. Those were specific to him. Just like he was giving him specifics, he gives us specifics as well. He tells us what we're supposed to do. He guides us to where we're supposed to go. But it starts first with that. Do you love him? Start with that.